I'm pretty sure you can guess why we're talking about the Resident Evil films this month. I personally have a love-hate relationship with the Resident Evil franchise. I absolutely love the games and I've been playing them since I was 15 years old, but the movies on the other hand, I keep watching them since I was 12 years old and I somehow keep crawling back to them when I know they're not great films. You know when you're craving your local KFC or kebab shop and you know it's going to be bad, but you just need a little taste of it, and then after 10 minutes of tucking yourself into it, you then have the sudden urge to empty your guts in the nearest bathroom you can find. That's how I feel about the Resident Evil movies. Now, video game movies are becoming a big deal again lately, especially with the Minecraft movie and Until Dawn coming out next month. So I may as well talk about a franchise that has made the most adaptations out of any video game franchise out there that is still somehow bloody breathing since 2002. Now, I'll only be talking about the first 3 Resident Evil movies until something else related comes out, because if I have to go through all the live-action Resident Evil films in a row, I'm going to need to take a long shower while listening to some Adele and questioning why I chose to do this to myself. But with that being said, I'm Azza the Pop Culture Viking, and with spoilers ahead, let's take a pop culture look into Resident Evil 2002.
After you.
Well, I may as well get started on the origins of the Resident Evil franchise, since the games are the only thing I enjoy and like about the franchise. So Resident Evil originated in Japan, where the first Resident Evil game was created by Shinji Mikami and Takuro Fujiwara, and I am so sorry if I butchered those names with my Australian accent, and produced by Capcom for the original PlayStation and released in 1996. The game is an action survival horror where we play as 2 characters as members of the elite police unit called STARS, aka Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, where you must solve puzzles, look for clues, and fight zombies and other dangerous creatures. The game is credited for defying the zombie horror genre and returning zombies to popular culture, where the franchise spawned more popular and well-received sequels like Resident Evil 2 and 3, and along with changing the formula and gameplay from Resident Evil 4 to 6 from camera angles to a third-person shooter, then changing back and forth with more sequels and remakes from Resident Evil 7 and 8 being a first-person shooter, and the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake being a third-person shooter this time around. Also, the franchise is called Biohazard in Japan, while North America and other parts of the world uses Resident Evil as the name of the franchise. This is due to legal reasons with a punk rock band group called Biohazard. Resident Evil was a massive hit, which became Capcom's best-selling franchise and the best-selling horror game series with 154 million copies sold worldwide as of December 2023. Now, it's a no-brainer, and pun definitely not intended, that thanks to the popularity of Resident Evil and video game movies that were everywhere in the late 90s to early 2000s, it was inevitable that Resident Evil would get the same treatment. German production company Constantine Films bought the live-action film rights for the Resident Evil franchise in January 1997 and hired screenwriter Alan B. McElroy to write the script, who was also working on a script for another video game adaptation of the Doom series, which was eventually scrapped. Should I do an episode on the Doom movie that we did eventually get? I don't know, let me know in the comments if you want to see that. Alan McElroy's script was published in an article in PlayStation Magazine talking about the film adaptation, which was described as action and horror-packed, very violent, and the script was similar to the original game. The McElroy script had some changes, which involved a plot of a special forces team on a rescue mission at the Spencer Mansion, but turns into a trap where the soldiers end up as test subjects in an experiment. The script did involve all major characters and monsters from the game, but no mention of the Umbrella Corporation or STARS. But this movie never came to be, as the script was rejected. Next, the godfather of horror himself, George A. Romero, was brought on board. Now, if that name sounds familiar, well, he's responsible for creating some of the greatest zombie films of all time, like the Living Dead franchise, which influenced the Resident Evil games. So he's definitely overqualified for the job. Now, the reason Romero was brought on board was due to directing a commercial in Japan for the up-and-coming Resident Evil 2 in 1998. Sony saw the commercial and asked Romero if he could write and direct a Resident Evil film. Romero had his secretary play the entire game through and recorded the gameplay so he could study it as a resource. Romero's screenplay was based on the first Resident Evil game and included characters from the video game. Chris Renfield and Jill Valentine were the lead characters. Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Ada Wong, and Albert Wesker were also to appear in the movie. The ending of the film would also be similar to the best ending to the first Resident Evil game. Romero also hired artist Bernie Wrightson to design some of the concept artwork for the creatures of the film, including several designs for the Tyrant. Romero said that the best script for the film was supported from members of Capcom and Constantine Films, but in an interview with Fangoria magazine, he wrote a total of 5 or 6 different drafts for the script, but they were all rejected. Sorry, how the fuck did that happen? So Robert Colzer, who was the head of production, said that he felt Romero's script was good, but the film would have received an NC-17 rating if it had been approved. He also said that the producers thought that McElroy did well with his script, but they rejected it because by the time it was finished, the second game would have been released, and they felt that the film based on the first game would appear dated. Oh, you guys really fucked up on that one, didn't you? But if you guys are curious to see what the original scripts were going to look like for the original Resident Evil adaptation, in 2019, the George A. Romero Archival Collection are available to read at the University of Pittsburgh's library system if you are interested, as well as a documentary that was released in early 2025. In the 2000s, director Jamie Blanks, who directed films like Urban Legend, was attached to make a new adaptation which would have borrowed elements from the Resident Evil 2 and 3 games. But instead, Paul W.S. Anderson was brought on board in the 2000s as writer and director after directing the adaptation of Mortal Kombat in 1995.
Your brother's soul is mine.
After playing Resident Evil, Anderson saw its cinematic potential and wrote a script titled Undead, which he described as, air quotes, a rip-off of the game. The head of Constantine Films was keen on the idea, so Anderson developed it as a script for Resident Evil, and project re-entered into pre-production stages. Anderson stated that the film would not include any tie-ins to the video game series, as underperforming movie tie-ins are too common, and Resident Evil, of all games, deserves a good celluloid reputation. Okay, let's see how we go. Alright, let's have a look at the casting and see who played the most iconic characters from the video games that we all know and love, who are totally 100% in this movie. We'll start with Mila Jovovich as Alice, which after the film's releases, Mila and Paul W.S. Anderson would be engaged and eventually married with 3 children. Well, isn't that adorable? Michelle Rodriguez as Rain, Eric Mabius as Matt, which the role was signed to David Boreanaz but had to turn down the role due to commitments to the TV show Angel. James Purefoy as Spence, Colin Salmon as James Shade, aka One. Other cast members include Martin Cruz as Kaplan, Heike Markish as Dr. Lisa Addison, Pascal Adiati as JD, Liz May Bryce as Olga, Michaela Dicker as Red Queen, and Jason Isaacs as an uncredited doctor and scientist who turns out to be Dr. Birkin, but we'll talk about that later. And yes, that's Malfoy's dad from the Harry Potter franchise. Now, the story was a bit different compared to what we eventually got, as the film was meant to have a connection to the video games. The film was originally subtitled as Resident Evil Ground Zero when it was considered a prequel to the games, but the subtitle was removed due to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The film synopsis as of March 16, 2001 revealed that Jovovich's Alice and Rodriguez's Rain were the leaders of a commando team sent to prevent a viral outbreak from spreading to the rest of the world. The character of the Red Queen was added into the film's story as a homage to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. In March 2001, half of the film was shot in Adlershelf Studios along with its surroundings in Berlin, Germany. Principal photography began on March 5, 2001 at numerous locations, including the then unfinished station U-Bahnhof Budenstag of the Berlin U-Bar, which acted as the entrance to the High facility, and the U-Schloss Lenstedt, which acted as the mansion at the beginning and end of the film. Again, sorry for mispronouncing those names with my Aussie accent. During mid-2001, the musical score and soundtrack were composed by Marco Beltrami, who has done musical scores for multiple genres of films like A Quiet Place, Hellboy, The Wolverine, and Logan, along with Marilyn Manson. Yeah, great bloke, isn't he? Special effects were a combination of CGI, stunts, wirework, set pieces, and rigged explosions. To prepare for their roles, Mila Jovovich, Eric Mabius, and actors playing commandos had a week of commando training which involved climbing, martial arts, weapons handling, and more from former Navy SEAL James Butler. The main actors were told to prepare for the film by getting copies of the games and playing the story throughout. Some of the actors didn't know if they could complete the game in time, so they had to get copies from other people beating the games and then watching it. Even towards the end of the film, all the cuts and bruises Mila Jovovich's character Alice had were real and were done with no makeup. During the shooting of the sewer scene, Mila Jovovich right-hooked Paul W.S. Anderson in the face, giving him a black eye, and by the end of the filming, Mila Jovovich hurt about 3 cast and crew members. Okay, maybe keep your distance if you're working on a movie with Mila Jovovich if you don't want to get punched in the nose. The makeup and special effects were a mix of makeup applications and CGI for certain zombies in the scene. Professional dancers were cast as the more action-oriented zombies, as they had to be flexible enough to do stunts required to perform the disturbing movements. Anna Bolt, who plays the zombie scientist in this scene, learned how to scuba dive to portray the drowning research scientist who revives underwater. The makeup department and crew also had hard times dealing with the dogs, who kept licking the zombie makeup, blood, and meat off themselves. Well, that's what happens when you put meat in your dog makeup. 2 full-scale lickers were made, which were a combination of puppets and CGI. One was more detailed than the other and was capable of many movements, including the jaw and lips opening, head movements, and the tongue extending, while the other one was used for more wider shots where the whole body was seen, and all the more difficult shots of the licker climbing on the walls and ceiling were done with CGI. Okay, so before we touch on the whole movie itself, let's just discuss the differences between the video game and the movie. Now, this segment is just for the Resident Evil movies, which I like to call, at least they gave it a go. So remember when I mentioned about the cast and characters earlier in the video? Oh, wait, hold on, checks notes. notes. There is not a single motherfucker in this movie that is playing any of the characters from the video games. These are all completely original characters made for the movie. The only character that does appear that's from the games is an uncredited Jason Isaac playing Dr. William Birkin, but I have IMDb telling me that he is Dr. Birkin, but then it turns out it's Dr. Isaacs in the next movie. There's no Chris Renfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, or Albert Wesker. Now, they do appear later in the film franchise, and we'll talk about them another time, but clearly the filmmakers thought that this was a standalone prequel like they originally planned. The character of Alice ends up as the face of the movie franchise, but she never makes an appearance or mention in any of the games, and not only the movie ends up as its own thing, but the movies end up as non-canon and become their own continuity. Now, the movie does feature a mansion, but it's not the Spencer Mansion like in the games. Instead, it's a front and entry point to an underground lab that's under Raccoon City. And the mansion in the movie we roughly see for about 10 minutes in the film, where the mansion is a major area in the game. However, I will give the film credit that elements and little details from the games are featured in the movie. The underground lab is there, but in the movie it's called the Hive, where in the game it's called Nest. Certain camera angles are a reference to the games, along with photo designs that are pick-up items for clues, and a newspaper which is similar to what references the events that kick off the game. We get zombies, Cerberus, and lickers featured in the film, but there are heaps of enemies in the game that didn't make the cut, like giant spiders, snakes, and the famous Tyrant. We get mentions of the Umbrella Corporation, Raccoon City, RPD, and STARS, the Nemesis program, and of course the T-Virus as the cause of the outbreak in the lab. Other things that get added into the film that mix between the movies and games is the final boss fight with the mutated licker while escaping on a train, which the train element is featured multiple times in the games. The AI security system, the Red Queen, where the name is mentioned in Resident Evil Revelation, and the laser room which makes an appearance in the original Resident Evil 4. In all honesty, I can see this as a standalone Resident Evil film in between the first two games that could work, but they just couldn't leave well enough alone, could they? And this is a major problem with a lot of video game movies. The filmmakers just take out what fans love about the games and just serve us a slap on the forehead and just shoving it down our throats. But now let's talk about the actual movie. To me, it's fine. It's fine. It's the early 2000s. You couldn't have a movie without electronic metal soundtracks, shootouts, Michelle Rodriguez, and action scenes. I think the setup is done decently to give the looming danger the characters are going to be in the lab and facility in lockdown after the T-Virus is breached, the Special Forces team infiltrating the mansion, and the effects of the containment outbreak with the facility just empty. But the problem with the movie is the number of questions the characters ask is a bit annoying, and having two characters with amnesia is a cheap way to get those questions answered.
Listen to me. I want to know who you people are, and I want to know what's going on here. Who's the Red Queen? What is that?
Like, I get it's a way to cheaply explain everything to moviegoers who have never played the Resident Evil games before, but for regular fans like myself, it can come across as very annoying. Plus, some of the line deliveries are pretty cringe, but it depends on the way you watch this movie.
Can't do this!
Blow me.
Also, I just don't like the characters in this movie. Alice doesn't really do much until halfway through the movie with the infected dog attack scene where she starts carrying the film. Matt is handcuffed for half of it and is there to look for his sister Lisa, who works at the Hive. The Umbrella Special Forces are probably the worst soldiers I have ever seen in a movie and easily get killed throughout the whole movie, including the character Rain, who just keeps getting herself bitten by fucking zombies like a bloody drip. 3 times she got bitten, just FYI. She's basically a stone and chain to the group and a ticking time bomb. Like, she's fucked at this point. You seriously need to go. While some of the practical effects are decent, the CGI in some scenes are not great in the first film, which surprisingly gets better later in the series. That's actually weird to say knowing what's to come. Perfect examples are some of the zombies with missing body parts, the Red Queen, and the licker are very noticeable. I also hate the villain. Like, in the game, and spoilers for a famous video game that came out in the 90s, Albert Wesker, who is a member of STARS, is revealed as the villain and works for the Umbrella Corporation. Where in the movie, the character Spence is the villain who started the outbreak in the lab and stole the T-Virus and antivirus, and him and Alice both work for the Umbrella Corporation, because remember, they had amnesia due to the security system protocol. Also, Alice is passing information to Matt's sister Lisa to expose the Umbrella Corporation's dirty little secrets. Now, keep in mind, all of this was revealed through a flashback after Spence gets his memory back, so nobody even figured out that he caused all this, and he just exposed himself as the villain. He could have easily kept it a secret and dealt with everyone later, considering he gets himself infected and killed like a bloody idiot. Also, this is my personal opinion, but I honestly hate the use of the electronic metal metal songs or tracks used in this movie. Now, just to clarify, I'm not saying these songs are bad. I've been to Knotfest to see Slipknot, so I enjoy this type of music. But it basically screams I'm an early 2000s horror film. It feels like it belongs in one of those early Fast and Furious films, just like Michelle Rodriguez. Like, don't get me wrong, these soundtracks do work sometimes and were popular at the time, but I just hate it when I hear them in horror films, as it just takes the horror element away unless if it's done right. But look, while I can be a nitpicky critical bastard, I can watch the first few Resident Evil movies with an open mind and enjoy them for what they are. First, I think the opening scene really shows how terrifying it is to work with the Umbrella Corporation. Like, just imagine it's just another regular day, you sit at your computer, your husband or your wife calls, "Hi honey, still okay to meet up for lunch? Actually, there's a fire drill and we must evacuate, so I'm going to be late. Hang on, why aren't the doors opening? Why is everyone screaming? Is that a fucking elevator falling? Move it, Jody, you stupid bitch!" The variety of zombies you see from scientists, office workers, security guards, who we all saw as humans earlier in the movie, going from just regular people working a 9 to 5 to becoming horrible monsters. Which is an aspect I love when watching zombie movies. The infected dogs, aka the Cerberus, are taken straight from the games, and the liquor is the same despite the dated CGI. The only thing I don't like is that the liquor is only explained as an early experiment from Umbrella, and it's mutated after feeding on someone. Where in the game, liquors are already mutated people who were infected with an unknown strain of the T-virus, and they are blind and sensitive to sound, which would have been something that could have been added into the film. Plus, I will give credit to the zero fucks given to everyone in the movie. Since the laser room scene, you get introduced to the soldiers who become the ultimate badasses, which is similar to Predator and Aliens. Half the team gets butchered by the laser room thanks to the security system, and they did my boy Shay dirty in this scene. JD gets ripped to shreds while trying to open a door. Kaplan gets flung straight out of a moving train, and it's a miracle that Rain was even still breathing after being bitten multiple times and looking like me after a night out on my 23rd birthday. The set designs are good as well. The sets do feel like it belongs in a Resident Evil game. If you have played the Resident Evil games, you do notice the progression of the games, going from a regular house or office or a village area, and then as you explore the game, it gets bigger and grander, which makes the game feel bigger than you think. The movie does the same thing here, going from a mansion to an underground lab, cutting through hallways, lab areas, offices, and along with a massive or small rooms filled with enemies. Plus, the movie does a great job in using tension and danger the characters are in. Like, once the characters are not in control with the situation, that's when shit really starts to hit the fan. Like, not only the team was sent down to reset the system and investigate the situation, but must change plans when half the team gets killed and need to escape before the facility is locked down with no chance of escape. I just love that switch from everything is under control to, nah, this is fucked, we need to go. Plus, I will give credit to Alice, who carries the rest of the movie when she starts being useful. I do like her confidence getting built up as she starts remembering everything after the whole amnesia situation. Definitely doesn't give two shits about Spencer's fate after he betrayed everyone. And of course, taking down zombies and monsters like a badass. I also think the last 10 minutes of the film does a decent job in setting up the sequel, with Alice and Matt being the last survivors left. Matt gets infected from the liquor, random scientists show up to take him away, we get a name drop of the Nemesis program, which would have given Resident Evil fans a massive stiffy in 2002, and we have Alice waking up in a hospital in Raccoon City while it's abandoned due to the zombie outbreak from the T-virus. The way the film leaves us could have gone either way. It could have been a standalone film then and there, with the thought of Alice being somewhere out there during the events of the Resident Evil 2 and 3 games. Could have been a story that happened during or after the events of the first Resident Evil game, or the next film would have followed Alice as she tries to escape Raccoon City, with cameo appearances from Jill Valentine, Claire Renfield, or Leon Kennedy. We do end up getting an answer with the release of Resident Evil Apocalypse in 2004, but we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Got it? See how easy that was?
But anyway, those are my thoughts on Resident Evil. Let's see what the fans and critics think. Well, the fans seem to like this movie. Critics, on the other hand, not so much. So I'll let Obi-Wan Kenobi take over. Just a heads up, he'll be making a regular appearance during these episodes.
Oh, not good.
Now, it's very divided between fans and critics, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 36% for critics, and with an audience score of 67%. One critic stated, like other video game adaptations, Resident Evil is loud, violent, formulaic, and cheesy. While Metacritic had unfavorable reviews, rating it 35 out of 100. Robert K. Elder from the Chicago Tribune thought the film updates the zombie genre with an anti-corporate message while still scaring its audience and providing heart-pounding action. Resident Evil made it to everyone's favourite film critic Roger Ebert's list of the most hated films in 2005. In his review, Ebert described it as a zombie movie set in the 21st century, where large metallic objects make crashing noises just by being looked at. and criticised the dialogue for being a series of commands and explanations with no small talk. Probably the most positive review out of the film critics was director James Cameron, who in a 2014 interview labelled Resident Evil as his biggest guilty pleasure film, which I'm guessing he has a copy to share with his crew when they're not exploring the Titanic again. Fans, on the other hand, love coming back to these movies. It's either teens who saw this at the right time with the mix of action and horror that was on the rise in the early 2000s, some love it as a cheesy action film that's a fun time to watch, and others are fans of the original Resident Evil games who see it as its own thing which features elements from the games. It's either you're a hardcore fan of the games and love the movies, or you're a hardcore fan of the games but don't mind watching the movies. And you will be surprised with the fan base of these movies. As for the box office, with a budget of $33 million, the film made $103 million at the box office. Now, despite the critics' negativity, it's bloody baffling how profitable these movies get. The film opened in over 2,500 theatres and grossed over $17 million on its opening weekend, and ranking in second place behind Ice Age. The film grossed over $40 million domestically and a worldwide total of over $103 million worldwide. As for the marketing and merchandise, in March 2001, the official website was set up, which revealed the film's original October 26, 2001 release. The website was fully open in July 2001 and composed of images, plot information, character biographies, and downloads. In January 2002, the film was officially announced to have an R rating. Although Anderson decided not to make it as gory as the games, originally it received an NC-17 rating and Anderson had to make cuts. The uncut version was teased but never released. In December 2001, Sony gave fans a chance to design the film's poster with a prize of an undisclosed amount of cash and free screening of the film. On February 16, 2002, Nick DeBarris, a 23-year-old aspiring actor and ex-video game magazine designer, was announced as the winner of the competition, where his design became the official film poster. The movie's trailer and clips were released in late January and early February 2002. Resident Evil was released in March 15, 2002 in the US. Resident Evil Special Edition was released on VHS and DVD by Columbia TriStar Home Entertainment on July 30th, 2002 in the United States, released in April of 2003 in United Kingdom, and in October 2002 for Australia. The Special Edition included a number of documentaries, including 5 features, one of which explaining the making of Resident Evil, the film's score composition, costume design, set design, zombie makeup tests, and a music video from a remix version of My Plague by Slipknot. A deluxe edition was released on September 7th, 2004, which included new special features such as an alternative ending with director Paul W.S. Anderson's video introduction, a clip compilation for Resident Evil Apocalypse, from game to screen features, a storyboard Resident Evil feature, and 6 other exclusive features: the creature, the elevator, the train, the laser, zombie dogs, and zombies. Screen Gems released Resident Evil Resurrected Edition, a 2-disc package containing Resident Evil and Resident Evil Apocalypse, on September 4th, 2007. On January 1st, 2008, a Blu-ray of the Resident Evil trilogy was released. The film was also released on Ultra HD Blu-ray along with the 5 sequels on November 17th, 2020. Over 2 years after the film's release, a novelization was published on June 29, 2004 called Resident Evil Genesis. The book has several differences between the book and film, where the novel provides more details of Alice's life and backstory, elaborates the organization that Matt and Lisa are working with, and adds more details of the events before the story, the outbreak, and the Hive mission. The book was also written alongside Resident Evil Apocalypse, which was advertised as a prequel to the film's sequel. In the United Kingdom, Resident Evil was broadcasted for the first time on UK TV and was watched by 2.8 million viewers on television during the first half of 2005, making it the 8th most watched UK film on television at the time. And just to clarify why it's a UK film, while Resident Evil is set in the US, the film was made and produced in Europe from British and German film distributors, so I hope that makes sense. Now, before we wrap this up, I have to mention the video games, as some of the movies were actually released during the same year as new entries were coming into the Resident Evil franchise. Now, the Resident Evil games had released multiple video games, including Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and other spin-offs including Code Veronica 1 and 2 and Resident Evil Gaiden. But during the film's release, the Resident Evil remake was released for the GameCube on March 22nd, 2002, which was a week after the film's release. The game is a survival horror and follows the same plot as the original game, as the STARS team's members investigate a series of murders in the mountains near Raccoon City, where the characters can choose between the characters of Chris Renfield and Jill Valentine. The difference between the original and remake are improved graphics, gameplay, and voice acting, which was notoriously bad in the original game.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Resident Evil 0 was released for the Nintendo GameCube on November 12, 2002, which served as a prequel to the original game, which follows the story of police officer Rebecca Chambers and convict Billy Cohen. The characters explore an abandoned training facility for employees of Umbrella and just takes place before the events of the first Resident Evil game. Both games would get multiple re-releases on multiple platforms and generation consoles, including Xbox, PlayStation, and other Nintendo consoles like the Wii and Nintendo Switch. Now with Resident Evil 2002, while I share negative comments and opinions on this entry in the franchise, I still enjoy coming back to these films as I love the Resident Evil games, I love the zombie genre, and I enjoy watching these movies when I was a young teenager in high school. And I saw this movie before I even knew it was based off the video game, so I can thank Resident Evil 2002 for introducing me to both the video game and film franchise. I mean, the franchise is basically an IV drip for me at this point, and if you look at it from the release point of view, it did come at the right time thanks to the resurgence of zombie films like 28 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead, and Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake. And of course the Resident Evil remake and prequel came out that year, so it would have definitely made you want to play the Resident Evil games after watching the film, or the game made you wanted to check out the movie. But let me know your thoughts on Resident Evil 2002, and don't forget we'll be covering the next couple of Resident Evil movies, so make sure you stay tuned for those episodes. But if you want me to continue to torture myself with the rest of the Resident Evil movies, let me know, I might rework my schedule and I'll add them to the list. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.
I'm missing you already.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do want to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit that notification button. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if there's a movie that you guys would like for me to look at, feel free to comment down below. Until then, I'm As the Pop Culture Viking, and always love pop culture.